G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Alicia Cook from Emerson Health based in Launceston, Tasmania here in Australia. Thanks for your time today, Alicia.
Thanks for having me, Troy.
Let's start with how we know each other. Sam from the PR Hub has sent us quite a shit ton of great guests over the last 3 years actually, and Sam's also been on the podcast. And you ran into her in Sydney as she was in your EO chapter or forum you just mentioned before we hit record.
Yeah, we're actually both members of EO Melbourne. But when Sam arrived and we had a chat, and it turns out that she lives in Sydney, which is also where I hail from, and so we have that connection too. Plus, we're sole founder, sole parent entrepreneurs, so we have lots in common.
Yeah. Well, tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
So my business is called Emerson Health. It's a professional services firm. We work with health and human services organisations. And we really work around performance improvement and creating system change. So my background is that I'm a health informatician, and I've also trained in transformational coaching. And so that's what we put together to make stuff happen.
How did you start out?
It's a great story of a heroic journey. So when I had a background in healthcare my entire career, I started out in healthcare communications and advertising. I moved into technology sales and medical publishing, and then I moved into government roles, and I worked on my health record when it came out and implemented a whole heap of digital health projects. And eventually I ended up working on activity-based funding, which is how we fund public hospitals, and I was managing these really big consulting contracts and feeling really a little bit disappointed by what was coming out of them. And after a while, I started to think, well, maybe I could do this a bit differently. And eventually sat through one too many bureaucratic meetings and decided that I would try a different path. So that's really where it started. I had a couple of years where I was subcontracting as a sole trader. And then after I had my son, I decided that I would actually go out on my own. I thought if I could push a baby out, then I could do anything, and I would set up my own company.
Right. What year did you start out and how old were you then?
So that was when I started a proprietary limited company. It was 2016. I was 35, and I'd probably been working without having a regular paycheck since I was 32, I'd say.
Yep. Great. And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over the last 8 years?
Yeah. So when I started out, I think first couple of years, I did just under 300K per annum, and that was me really as a single shingle. And I really had throttled it at that level. So I was quite nervous about how I would deliver work if we sold any more than that. So I wasn't really marketing. I didn't have a website for the first couple of years. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's really unbelievable. And what happened was, after I moved to Tasmania from Sydney, COVID hit, and I thought that this is really an opportunity for us. It's like, if we can make it through COVID, then we will actually come out the other side really strong. And I decided to start hiring, and that's when I brought my then second in charge on board, and that's really what started the growth.
Oh, fantastic. And what number of full-time equivalents? You obviously started on your own. Where did you get to at your peak?
We got up to 9.
Yep.
And we did just over $1 million revenue when we peaked. So it was a pretty fast, took 2 years really to go from being single shingle to like having a team.
And how big's the team now?
It's actually quite small. I've done a full restructure. So we've had a lot of changes in the market, and the economy's, I'll say, pretty sluggish. And I decided that we needed to really change the way that we operated our business. So we had been hiring management consultants who are people who are generally in their 20s, who have postgraduate degrees, who may not have any consulting experience, or 6 months of consulting experience, and they were really expensive salaries, and we would train them up. And then they would stay with us for maybe a year if I was doing well, and then go off to bigger and better things. And basically that was a really expensive recruitment business model to have. And I had decided that if we were going to deliver clients the complex projects that they wanted, we actually needed to change our back end. So now we have back office staff that are subcontracted casuals that do those functions. And we actually work with subcontractors on a project by project basis who are subject matter experts to deliver it. So it's a completely different operating model. It's really using the associate model moving forward.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
I actually don't feel like I have yet, Troy.
I'm going to change this question, I swear. Half the people answer it with that.
I had to think about it when I read it, and I was like, actually, I don't like, I've been successful and I'm proud of my achievements, but I don't feel like I've realized my potential yet. And there's still more work to be done.
What does success look like to you?
I actually think it's when the company's mission's been achieved. So, and I had a choice to make when things started to go south a bit was, are you going to chuck this whole thing out, or are you going to stick with it or rebuild it, or what are you going to do, something else? And I do have a few other little irons in the fire, but ultimately I felt that the mission was really important and that it hadn't been achieved. And I felt such a connection with that I have to keep going until that's been done. And that will be, for me, what success looks like. And there'll be a little bit, there's obviously life goals and financial goals and those sorts of things as well. But that's the thing around the business, really.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business? Did you change your approach to marketing after, first few years not having a website?
So my biggest challenge has been around visibility. And I started out in advertising. So if you think about these businesses that people start, they say that the strength of the founder is the weakness of the business. And that's absolutely true, because I would not let anyone else do the marketing work because I could do it better. And I should have been willing to tolerate slightly not perfect work to actually just have something done. Like, something is better than nothing. So yes, I would recommend having a website. I did have really beautiful business cards, but yes, you need to have a website. And the way that we would generate leads is actually very labor intensive. So the way that I would sell a piece of work, I'll say in the olden days, is that I would go out and visit a client face to face, and I would have a conversation with them. And I would know that eventually we would work together at some point in time, because how we would sell businesses around their level of trust in me and my ability to demonstrate trust and knowledge with them. But that's not really a scalable way to grow a business. And so now it's really focused on how can we connect with our clients to develop that know, like, and trust over a period of time. So now we actually offer bi-monthly learning professional development sessions. And that is actually how we're starting to develop our relationships with our clients now.
How did you fund the business?
Entirely bootstrapped. But you asked a little bit about funding. While we were growing during that growth phase, I don't know where I got this very good piece of information from, but someone said, when you're doing well, that's when you should be borrowing money. So I got a very chunky loan from a bank during that period of time that we didn't actually need, because the cost of funding was so cheap that it was cheaper than if I was to get short-term debt if I ever needed it. So we actually took that on during our growth trajectory, and I'm so glad that I did.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yes, I would, because our sectors are professional services, and I think there's a place for professional services in the Australian economy, probably the global economy. And also we work in healthcare, disability and aged care, which are also growing sectors. So from my perspective, as long as you've got the right solution, I can't see how that would be a place you wouldn't want to be.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yes. When it was about 2 years ago now, I mentioned that I'm a sole parent. My son started to have trouble going to school, and it's called school refusal or school avoidance. And juggling that, even though I had designed the business so that it was pretty much running without me, it was still a problem. And basically I had to be able to look after him and really step back from what I was doing. And that was really challenging. So it's actually not anything that was wrong with the business. It's actually handling your personal life when things are really challenging there. And fortunately, the team really stepped up. But at the same time, we've got the contraction going on. And that's you can't probably do both of those things at once if you're relying on your founder as your source of business development.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like a really challenging time. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
So I have to do a lot of work around marketing, but for me, it's really about being visible and being happy to be visible. So that's the focus for me because I like to be behind the side, behind the scenes a little bit. And so being willing to be the public face is really essential in a business where it's all around people and relationships. And also because it's the business that I started, and it's the mission that I have given to it. I need to make sure that's happening. I can't let other people sort of say that they're not committed to that cause in the same way that I am.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
When I actually, do you know what? I look back on it, and when I think about our growth, it was fun. I don't think there was much, like there's always the pressure and the stress of the rhythm of how things were going, but actually it was a great ride and I enjoyed it. And when I look back on it, I'm like, there's things that we did where we were trying to behave like a much bigger organization than what we were, but I still think they were good things to do.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I just think it's really, for me, it was around the intellectual challenge of it. So there's the strategy of how you're growing your business and where you're going. And I think of it as like polishing a rock, like you know what's wrong with it and you are fighting fires from time to time. And you have to fix the bits that are not quite right. I'm polishing this bit and polishing that bit and, this bit we'll deal with later. But like, that's the bit that's really, I think, interesting because it challenges me in a way that nothing else that I have done does.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
For me, a lot of the mindset is really around, it's very woo-woo. It's around ideas about abundance, that there's actually, we're here to provide change in the world, but we're also here to do it and, generate a profit. So it's really this idea that there's always more money out there and that it's an energetic exchange. So that's really important to me. And also this idea of a heroic journey. So I mentioned, I think earlier, I trained in transformational coaching, and that metaphor of the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell really, I think, is a metaphor for so many things in life, but it's also a metaphor for entrepreneurship. And I find that really helpful to think about where I am along the way and, how we deal with the challenges that come up from time to time.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
You're going to love this. Systems and delegation. So
yes, I do love it.
100%. You need the systems because you don't want to be doing everything, and you need to delegate because you also shouldn't be doing the low value work. And if you get your systems and your delegation right, it is a dream.
Yeah, and I mean that's often a trap for small business owners, particularly starting out. And did it take you long? Like, are you a natural delegator, or it took you a few years to come to that realization and get a handle on it?
It was really hard. I think the first thing I outsourced was the bookkeeping, and that's actually hard to give up because there's a lovely therapy in getting into zero and reconciling transactions because it's nice, mindless work. It's not very taxing. It's done correctly. You can spend your time on that. It's actually a terrible use of a founder's time, and that should be given to a bookkeeper. So that's where I started. Where I can line up the revenue trajectory with our performances when I got a PA, because like many founders, I'm a little bit all over the shop, ideas left, right, and center. So you think about this idea of the founder as being the visionary, and then you've got the integrator. I was very lucky. I had two integrators. I had someone who was a subject matter expert and my PA, and they were able to do all that stuff. And really that's like dynamite for growth.
Yep. And out of interest, your personal assistant, were they onshore here in Australia or someone offshore?
So they were actually a local, and I was just very lucky to find them. And what happened was when I moved to Melbourne, because we needed to change schools, that's when they actually left the company because they needed some personal contact as well. So that's actually also been a challenge. So I need to find another one, and that's actually on my radar at the moment, is how do I do this? Am I going to go offshore? Am I going to get someone local? Do I want a virtual assistant who also does marketing? Do I want a PA who can also handle my personal life and, sit on the phone for me and do all that sort of stuff? I've I really haven't landed on it, and it's something that's actually like my quarterly strategic priority is to sort that out.
Yeah, it's great way to unlock more time so you can spend it on business development.
Mm.
Are you a small business owner? You know that getting recruitment right can make or break your team's success. Just one mishire can cost your business up to 27 times their salary. Finding and retaining top talent is a challenge, especially in today's competitive market. That's where our Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit comes in. Over 10 intensive days, our online course is designed specifically for small business owners like you. We'll walk you through the process of sourcing and securing A players for your team. Here's what you'll gain. Learn the proven strategies to pinpoint and attract the best talent in your industry. Access our comprehensive playbook filled with templates and tools tailored to fit your business needs, and apply the resources right away to enhance your recruitment process and streamline hiring. Invest in your business's success by helping your management team become effective recruiters. Supercharge your hiring process today with the Ultimate Recruitment Toolkit, available at growasmallbusiness.com.
Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yes. So when there's lots of things on this. When we started to hire people, we actually developed a capability framework, which is like all the things that we think a consultant needed to be able to do and how would they move through the different consulting levels. So this is obviously back in the olden days. So relevant to you if you have a professional services firm and you're bringing people in who are actually doing the work. That was amazing because people would be measuring themselves against those capabilities. And when we would do performance reviews, you'd either be winning or you'd be learning against them. And so it really honed the attention of our team on what they needed to do to get that next title because they are very ambitious. That's really important. When we were recruiting, it actually got to a point where I wasn't even involved in the recruitment process, again, because I didn't need to be doing it and I wouldn't be managing these staff. So the ad would go up. We would have an interview round with the leadership team. There would be the shortlisted people would actually develop and deliver a presentation, and I wouldn't actually meet them until they were in their first week. So they'd actually have been brought in and onboarded and everything would happen. And that was just, beautiful.
That's phenomenal.
We could get someone interviewed and onboarded in 2 weeks if we needed to with the systems that we had.
Yep. And the recruitment, you pretty much nailed that most of the time. You didn't have a lot of churn.
We didn't. So we did have churn, and this is really part of the challenge of recruiting talented people who want to work on really intellectually stimulating projects, is that they are very ambitious. And if anything, what I would say is some of our best hires had not been actually the top performers. They might have been, in the top 25%, but perhaps were not the top 1% because they would stay longer. And once they had had all the skills, they were amazing. And I still miss those people to this day. I think, so that's part of it. And that's why I've changed my business model, because actually, whilst it's really nice to do that interesting work, I need a business model where the business is the operational back end and we keep our revenue matching our expenditure. And I suppose that's sort of how I'm thinking about it moving forward.
What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
So when we started Emerson Health, I had to work out what our mission and our vision and our values were. And they were my values, where I'd sort of kept, it was all about, my view of the world. And I sort of kicked out the ones that were a little bit too personal, like adventure is a big personal value for mine, but it's not part of the business. But really it was like, how can we make this business reflect all the things that we want? And so we would hire based on values, absolutely. The culture was amazing. We actually had a fully remote team. So I built Emerson Health before there was COVID and working from home to be the kind of business that I wanted to work in. So we already had a fully integrated tech back end. We were designed so that people can work from laptops from anywhere, because I believe that's how we would attract the best talent. And that worked really well. So people would be able to stay working with us, but go on holidays with their family, but perhaps work remotely from a holiday destination anywhere in the world. And that's something that we would support. And the team would do things like they would be having regular virtual catch-ups in the afternoon. They'd be doing trivia together. They'd have a stand-up in the morning. They're just fabulous humans. Fabulous humans.
Hello, audience, how you've handled balance.
Not great. And in the beginning, when I was delivering those projects, like I reckon those kind of billings are good billings for a startup. I also had a small child, like under 2 at the time. Like it was crazy doing that. I'd be getting up at 3 a.m. and writing reports, and I'd be working on the weekends. And I just chose to basically do work or parenting, and there was no personal time or social life. And that's what I had to do to get it up and running. I wouldn't do it again. Like I look back on that woman and I'm like, that's actually just ridiculous. And I should have structured the business better from the beginning to not have that taxing burden on me. Moving forward, like it's been a while lately. It's been a long time since I've worked on the weekends. And that was really when I started to build a team. And really the focus is, it's still a challenge now. It's like stepping back and thinking, what are actually the things that I have done in the past that were important to the business trajectory? And when I look forward, when I look back in the future on Alicia today, what will I say were the good decisions that she made?
And how much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Heaps. Heaps. I reckon, and also in the team, like I had a look, I reckon we spent, at our peak, we probably spent $50,000 or $60,000 in a year on professional development. And I would spend it again in a heartbeat because it's the best thing that you can do. The thing is, in the beginning, I was going to professional development for people in my sector. So I was occasionally going to conferences about the areas where I have subject matter expertise. And that's not professional development for you if you're an entrepreneur. What is professional development for you if you're an entrepreneur is all of the coaching and mentorship and all the things that you can do around your business operations and your product and your marketing and how you scale. And so that's really, I figured that out way too late, Troy. And then in the team, they were, as part of their onboarding, we would have a rule that if you were a senior con, you couldn't be a manager unless you'd done our manager tools training course. And we would actually pay for people to do that so that they actually had management skills before they were given direct reports to manage. And so there's lots of little things like that that we would actually just build into the way that we manage the business.
That's great. Not many small business owners invest in management training. Out of interest, are you talking about manager tools, the podcast guys, Mark and Mike?
Yeah.
Right.
So I was really lucky. I did that course in person in Sydney easily more than 10 years ago now. And, it's a game changer.
Absolutely. Phenomenal. Had Mark on the podcast, 3 years ago now. He's actually a friend of mine. When he's in Australia, he comes down to Tassie and plays golf with us. There's a couple of Launceston people and Hobart people. We go and play golf. When we're in the US, we go and play. He lives on Pebble Beach now on the golf course. So, yeah, but it's the best material I've come across on how to become a better manager. And I think you're the first guest we've had on that has found their material on their own without me actually mentioning it.
Thank you. You know what Mark told me that I will never forget, and I still do to this day, is about sending thank you cards. And, it is so important. It's just good manners. But, I learned a lot from him in, 2 days. So, yeah, it's really worthwhile investing in that.
Definitely. And every time we catch up, and it's not just when he's putting, I just tell him how shit his website is. He and Mike have just stepped out of the business last year, but terrible website. He probably won't listen to this episode, but great content, both their podcasts, their conferences, or even their online stuff as well, the video series on interviewing, etc. Yeah, phenomenal.
Yep. And wouldn't he be so proud to hear that I had even delegated the management and recruitment function to the ground? So
he'd be blown away. Absolutely. Have you had mentors along the way? You mentioned coaches.
Yeah, I have. So when I started out, again, I didn't really know what I was doing. I sort of started out and I, did a few business courses, and I'll maybe talk a little bit more about them later on. But basically, the first thing I did was I was in Sydney and I got a New South Wales business advisor. Her name is Amanda Warrington. I actually am still in touch with her to this day. So that was where I began. And I remember we were in this little dinky meeting room and we had the whiteboard out and we were talking about the business. And she was like, how are you going to generate business? How are you going to deliver it? Like, she was just grilling me and I had an answer to everything. And I guess that sort of gave me the confidence to think, I actually think it's okay. Like, I didn't think she was fully confident that I was going to be able to pull it off, but I felt like I had an answer for everything. The only thing I didn't, and the biggest issue then that I pulled up with Amanda, was around being a woman in a male-dominated sector where being an older guy in a suit is really part of how sales are made. And that's been a challenge I've had to deal with the whole time that this business has been running. So that's where I began. I met Debbie King through a podcast that I listened to, and she's over in the US. And she was the person who really coached me through our growth period. And she was amazing. That was huge. And more recently, I've been working with a mentor who I was assigned through EO, Carolyn Van Heedy, who is like future me. And that's just a gift as well.
Yep. And you mentioned business courses.
So when I started, I reckon there's probably people who would be in a similar situation. The first thing I did was I spent about $2,000 US on Marie Forleo's B School, and that was really good. Not so much for the content, actually, as for the people that I met. And when you spend money like that, it's actually the networks that you're paying to get access to. So that was a really good one. I did Denise Duffield Thomas's Money Bootcamp. That was very influential, and I'm still involved in that. And that's really around mindset more than anything, which I think is really important. They're probably the biggest ones that come to mind. But I also paid for Jeff Walker's Product Watch Formula. When I first bought it, I didn't know what to do with it because obviously I'm a terrible marketer. But actually, I rewatched that last year, and through osmosis, I seem to have integrated a whole heap of stuff that he was talking about there as well. So I'm like, you just got to find, there's a lot of people that talk about the same kind of stuff as Jeff Walker these days, Alex Hormozy, those sorts of things. But like, I think Jeff is the grandfather. So you just pick the person who you click with and go with it.
Yeah, I call him the godfather of launches. Read his book a couple of years ago and also went through his course last year. He's got great material, and also the way he approaches it and imparts his teachings it really is really good, really powerful.
Yeah, there's been heaps. I also, I've recently joined the Dent KPI Accelerator. That's the other thing. And it hasn't even kicked off yet, but I've been going through those materials and already applying bits and pieces. So
maybe tell us a bit about that. What's that? How's that helping?
So the reason why I joined it was actually my coach mentor, Carolyn, gave me a kick in the pants about getting my pitch right. And so I started to look at how would I do this. And I had read Key Person of Influence over the summer, and I had already done a lot of the things that needed to be in place, but I thought I'd just go and look into it a bit further because everything that they were talking about was resonating with me as a small business owner. And then I went to the session, and Glenn Carlson's there, and he's talking about these business examples that they've helped. I'm like, oh yeah, I've bought from them, and I've bought from them. And I'm like, I always look at business models because it's obviously a topic of interest to me. And I'm like, well, I wonder if these guys can help me polish my business model, get my marketing right, and just make sure that all of those things that might have been not quite in place when I grew this business the first time around, can I fix those foundational gaps for the next crack that I take?
Yep, all right.
100% I'll be able to do that, I reckon.
Yeah. How long does that go for, that course?
They run it in I think they run 3 times a year. It's just participating in the sales process is educational in itself. They collect their students, they kick off. I'm going to start in May. And they've got these numerical ranges for where you should be, but basically I probably will be with them until I feel that there's nothing more to learn.
Have you read either of April Dunford's books? She claims to be world's positioning expert for B2B tech companies. Obviously awesome is the book on positioning, and then her second book, which came out late last year, is called Sales Pitch. It's all obviously about creating a great sales pitch, but you've got to do the positioning work first. I'll shoot you through a link to those 2 books. They're great.
Thank you. I read a lot of business books. Like, I have a business book addiction problem. So you asked me to pick one, but I can't pick one.
Yeah, no, we'll get to that, and you can throw in more than one for sure. But I'll shoot you through April's. Her podcast is good as well. Have you read The Jolt Effect?
No.
Okay.
There we go. Great.
Dig them out of my library. So April had Matt, one of the authors of The Jolt Effect, on. They wrote the Challenger Sale back in 2011, I think. I listened to that first, even though I'm a data nerd. Just that book didn't really resonate with me. But their latest book called The Jolt Effect really resonated. one, it had a shit ton more data. So thanks to COVID, obviously all sales calls had to go online. So they took 2.5 million sales calls, put them through machine learning, and then their thesis, what they wanted to understand was why does, I think it's 50, it's when you lose a sale to just no action. So a lot of people think it's just we're going to stay with the status quo. When they dug down into the data, they found that's true 44% of the time, but 56% of the time, it's actually FOMO, fear of messing up. So the person doesn't want to make a decision because their name's on this decision, especially if it's got a big budget behind it, and they don't want to be on the hook. So 56% of the time, that is what the actual problem is. So a lot of salespeople pile on FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt to try and get it across the line. You've got a short amount of time before this price goes away or whatever. Whereas for those 56% of the times, it's not, fear's only putting fuel on the fire. It's not helping. It's actually going to kill the deal. And you should disarm their fears. The book goes into a heap of great methods around that as well. But yeah, I found it really interesting and powerful.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
I suppose I mentioned I've been in an EO forum, and that's not quite the same as having a board of directors, but certainly as experience shares from other experienced entrepreneurs, and also with diverse perspectives that are not necessarily from your own sector. Anything like that I think is really helpful. I think having potentially some kind of advisory board in the future would be really beneficial.
All right, Alicia, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Knowing what to do next and avoiding things which take up your time that don't help you move forward.
Favorite business book or 2 that has helped you the most?
I've got 4 here, but I'm going to be really quick.
Go, fire them off.
Delegation and Team Building. It's Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell.
Good book. Read
Marketing. Yep. Alan Dibb, One-Page Marketing Plan.
Haven't read that one. I'm putting that on my list.
It's really good. It's really good.
Alan Dibb, was it?
Yeah, he's great.
Yep.
He's in Melbourne. You should meet him in Melbourne too.
Oh, cool.
In terms of growing, scaling up. So when I grew the business, I mentioned I had the coach, but actually my second in charge and I would just look up scaling up and do that thing, put the book down and get on with it. That was amazing.
That's great. Did you read his first version of that, Rockefeller Habits? Did you read that one?
Yep. Big Vern fan. And I got to meet him when he was in Melbourne last year. He was like, sorry to keep yapping on about this, but like he was in a room probably of 500 people, I don't know, 200 people. And he stood at that back door as everyone exited and shook hands with absolutely every single person in that room. And that is why he is such a legend.
Yeah. Seems like a nice bloke.
Yep. Great sales calls. Richard Mulholland and Hebe Dragons.
Yep. Haven't read it, but it's on. Yep. Great. Thank you. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I do. There's one called the ProServe podcast by Collective 54. I find that really helpful. I listen to Chill and Prosper by Denise Duffield Thomas. She's fantastic. And I listen to Built to Sell a lot as well.
Oh, I'm addicted to John Morillow's cast. We had him on our Quickfire Friday last year. Awesome material. And then Mick, one of my business partners, actually interviewed him for that. And then I went and listened to his book. And one of the benefits of doing the podcast is I learn there's not that many great books business books that I haven't come across. There's probably 5 that I've learned over the 4 years of doing this from guests, and Built to Sell's one of those, and Automatic Customer is his second book, and then The Art of Selling Your Business. But his Built to Sell radio podcast is awesome. And I listen to 3 or 4 episodes a week to get through his back catalogue. So really encourage business owners, even if you're not thinking of exiting anytime soon, listen to those superb casts.
It's gold. So I used to listen to those when I was driving between Launceston and Hobart, Troy, and I would listen out for what were the things that added value to these businesses when they were sold. And then if I could find even something tiny, I would go back and put it in place. And that was also happening while that growth, obviously there wasn't one thing I did to make us grow, but that was a big part of it too. Yeah,
and I actually had John on our cast, on our main cast 2 weeks ago now, 15th of April, his podcast went live. So yeah, that was a terrific episode as well. One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
This is an and sentence. Get a coach and consider an accelerator.
Yep. Final, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 8 years ago?
I would caution against networking because I did that when I began because I didn't know what I was doing. And actually, I just spent a lot of time on socializing when I should have been more diligently hustling.
Yeah, it's not scalable marketing, really.
Mm-mm.
Mm. Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed our chat. Congratulations on the growth, up and down a little bit, but really good that you've shared your journey with us. And I think the audience will get a lot of value from it and learn a few things as well. So I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Troy. Great to meet you.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.